The Carlson-Huckabee interview may be the wake-up call Americans needed. The interview brought the Israel First versus America First debate to heart of the American right. Professor in the Media Studies program at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Prominent American conservative journalist Tucker Carlson's interview with U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee has caused quite a stir. Since it was released on Friday, observers from across the political spectrum in the United States have taken to social media to comment. Indeed, the interview highlighted perhaps more than any other political or media spectacle the growing suspicion that American officials may be more loyal to a foreign country than they are to the U.S. This may well turn out to be a defining moment for how Americans view their government's relationship with Israel. Huckabee, who is also a Baptist minister and former governor of Arkansas, was confirmed as U.S. ambassador to Israel in April 2025. The news of his appointment was welcomed by the Israeli government and various pro-Israel groups, and he was hailed as a true friend of Israel. That Israel is quite close to Huckabee's heart was made clear throughout his interview with Carlson, as he repeatedly parroted Israeli talking points. He spoke of Israel's biblical right to the land, referred to the occupied West Bank as Judea and Samaria, and even appeared to approve of Israel expanding its territory to other parts of the Middle East. He repeatedly spoke of Israeli interests as U.S. interests, often used we seemingly including Israel, and even insisted that the problem on the border with Lebanon was an issue Americans should care about. He defended his meeting with Jonathan Pollard, the former American intelligence analyst convicted of spying on the U.S. for Israel, and for advocating for his early release from prison. Huckabee went as far as taking a jab at the U.S. Army in his effort to defend the violations of the Israeli military in Gaza. When Carlson pressed him about Israel's killing of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, he appeared to suggest that the Israeli military is more careful about avoiding civilian casualties than the U.S. military. After Huckabee argued that Israel's war on Gaza produced a lower number of civilians killed than any modern urban war, Carlson pressed him for a reference point. The ambassador offered two U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan as comparisons, suggesting that Israeli military commanders have been more concerned about protecting civilian life than their American counterparts. A U.S. ambassador publicly arguing that a foreign military is more humane than his own country's armed forces inevitably raises questions about where his primary loyalty lies. But Huckabee is, of course, not the only true friend of Israel within the U.S. political elite. The U.S. Congress, on both sides of the aisle, has been known to give boisterous standing applause to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu every time he visits. Huckabee's boss, U.S. President Donald Trump, has repeatedly claimed he is the best friend to Israel they've ever had. Trump's predecessor, President Joe Biden, has proudly declared he is a Zionist and ensured full support and impunity for Israel as it carried out genocide in Gaza. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham has boasted that he goes to Israel every 2 weeks whether I need to or not. Eric Adams, former New York City mayor, chose to visit Israel at the end of his tenure and said that as mayor of America's largest city, he had been serving Israel. For the longest time, declarations of loyalty to Israel were seen as a political advantage in U.S. politics. But this may well be changing. American academics have long been interested in Israel's oversized influence on U.S. politics. Scholars like John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt have written extensively about the issue. But for many years, this scrutiny was largely confined to academia or left-wing activist circles. Conservatives and liberals labeled such critics as conspiracy theorists or anti-Semites. The Carlson-Huckabee interview has perhaps let the cat out of the bag on the American right. What makes the interview important is not simply the substance of Huckabee's remarks, but the interviewer, venue, audience, and underlying message of the line of questioning. A hugely popular conservative media figure traveled to Israel and publicly pressed a sitting U.S. ambassador on whether American interests are being subordinated to Israeli interests. He questioned the theological and historical underpinnings of Zionism, criticized Israel's treatment of Palestinian Christians, and asked why U.S. tax dollars are sent to Israel. In his responses, the ambassador appeared to speak more as a representative of the Israeli government than the United States government. Judging by Huckabee's defensive reaction after the interview and its social media fallout, he is learning an important lesson: appearing to put Israel first and America second is no longer an asset, but a liability, for American politicians. Elected American officials will be watching the public reaction carefully, especially in light of polling data showing that American public opinion towards Israel has shifted dramatically in recent years. The political incentive that has driven decades of unconditional support for Israel has now been weakened. The political calculus, too, is changing. It may be politically advantageous for American officials to adopt more even-handed, even openly CR.